In this lesson, I want to talk about how we can use the major scale to find chords. Okay, this is a little bit of a theory lesson, but good to know, basic theory. So, as I said before about the major scale, it is the building blocks of music. I would consider it that, the building blocks. So basically, every chord is built off of components or parts of the major scale. For example, the major chord has 3 notes that come from the major scale. The first note of the major scale, the third note of the major scale, and the 5th note of the major scale. A minor chord has 3 notes that come from the major scale. The first note of the major scale, the flat third, so you take the third note of the major scale and you move it back 1/2 step or 1 fret, and that becomes a flat third. So root, flat third, and the 5th note of the major scale. So let me explain that or show that to you by playing the scale. So if we have a C chord, we already know our C major chord. And that chord is made up of a C, an E, and a G note. C, E, C, and G. So we doubled up the C, okay? But we have the G in there as well. So where do those notes come from? Well, let's look at the scale. I just told you at the beginning of the lesson that a major chord was built off of the first note, the third note, and the 5th note of a C major scale. So we play a C major scale. We have our root, C, that's our first note. So C. We have our second note, that's D, that's not in the chord. Our third note, E. We said the chord was made of C, E, and G. There's the third note is E. So let's find the 5th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a G. C, E, and G. Now, we can't play the chord using those notes where we found them in the scale, but now we can find them on other strings so we can play all the strings at one time. But now at least we found the notes that make up the chord. C, E, and G. So we can play our G here with an open string, and we can play our C, our root note there with an open string. We can play our E right there with an open string, and on the last string, since it's an A open, that's not an chord, so we play a C on the 3rd fret. Okay, so now let's do a minor chord. We learned E minor right here. And we know, I told you at the beginning of the lesson, a minor chord is made up of the root, the flat third, and the 5th. So let's take a look and see if we can find those. So our major scale, there's E. So you got to use that major scale. The root is E, that's our 1. Our third, our flat third, 1, 2, 3. There's our E major scale. 1, 2, 3, back. So you got to flat that note. You flat a note by going back, down in pitch, 1/2 step. And that's a G. So now we got to find the 5th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a B. So E minor is made up of E, G, and B. So then you find those notes on strings that are adjacent to each other so you can play all those notes at the same time. So we have B there, G there, and our root note E there. So now we got all 3 notes, and we have our E minor chord. So that's just some basic theory on how to find major and minor chords using the major scale to find the particular notes of those chords.